I wanted to see if I could learn how to make a video game, so I watched a bunch of videos and read some documentation and decided, yep, I can do this. I found an online course on making a 2D platformer style game that looked promising, so I spent the last 2 weeks working on my game, and now I wanted to share the progress. So just a quick background on my programming skills, or should I say, lack thereof. When I was a kid in the 80s, I loved programming simple text-based games on my Commodore 64 in BASIC. For those of you who don't know, BASIC is an ancient programming language that has been obsolete for decades. So other than that, I'm really learning all of this as I go. With that being said, go easy on me. Step 1 is to install all the software I'll be using for the project. By recommendation of the course I was following, I'm using Unity Game Engine, Microsoft Visual Studio for code, Photoshop for visuals, and Audacity for audio. So once that was all installed and set up, it was time to get to work. First, I need something to temporarily represent the player on screen. This little guy, who my wife affectionately named Rigatoni, will do for now. We will do artwork later. Everything that you see here in this video is just simple placeholder art. Next, I need something for him to stand on. After that, I started writing my first bit of code to make Rigatoni move left and right, and of course jump. You can't have a platform game without being able to jump. One of the best things about using a game engine like Unity is that I don't have to worry about programming physics. Unity has built-in physics functions that you can use already. They also have on their website a physics object script that you can download and use, and that will give you even more control and options over it. That's the route I went. Once I had the physics script set up, I started working on coding some more player attributes. I made adjustable variables for his gravity modifier, max speed, and jump power. This will allow us to introduce power-ups later on that can affect these attributes. After that, I set up the camera to follow the player and set a boundary for the camera so it didn't go too far off to one side or the other. I started to work on the background next. I implemented parallax layers for this so it would give an illusion of depth to my two-dimensional world. Basically, I made a script that allows me to adjust the movement speed of each layer in relation to the player. By setting them at different speeds, they produce the effect I was after. You could do a similar thing by just changing the z-axis of the layer, but once again, the script gives you more fine-tuned controls of this. I really like how this turned out. Next, I added some platforms into the level. This is where I learned about the platform effector function in Unity. Simply put, this allows the player to jump from underneath the platform and land on top of it, as opposed to hitting his head on the bottom of the platform and not being able to pass through it. This is something you may or may not want to apply depending on your level design, but it was definitely a good tool to add to my belt. Now I needed something to put on the platform to make the player want to jump on them. This is when I added collectibles to the game. I added all the classics, coins, hearts, and even a key. Once I had a temporary image in place for each one, I wrote a script to classify each collectible and add it to its appropriate spot. That's when I realized I didn't have anywhere to put them yet. To fix this, I started working on a user interface to show the player's health in the form of a health bar, a counter to show the number of coins collected, and a single inventory slot to show if they had picked up the key yet or not. Once that was finished, I needed something to do with the key, so I created a script for a gate that would require the player to have the key to open it. This was really starting to look like a game now, but it was missing one of the most important elements: bad guys. I quickly made a simple sprite for the enemy and got to work on programming him. The enemy movement script was a bit more complicated than the one for the player. I had to make sure the enemy was smart enough not to walk off the edge of a cliff, or if it ran into a wall or another enemy, it should turn around and go the other way. I also made it so if the player touches the enemy, he'll take damage from him. I then made adjustable variables for the enemy's attack power and health. That way I can use the same script for all the enemies in the future, but still give them different stats. Well, if the enemy can attack, it's only fair that little Rigatoni here can fight back. Time to implement an attack for him. I went with a simple close range attack. We gave Rigatoni the ability to breathe fire. The script here was pretty simple. If the enemy gets within range and the player presses the mouse button, the enemy will take damage. If the enemy reaches 0 hit points, he's dead and removed from the screen. If the player reaches 0 hit points, he dies, and for now, the game just starts over. One of the last things I worked on was ending the level and loading a new one. This involved writing a script to trigger the loading of a new level when the player touches a chosen spot in the level. In this case, the other side of the gate. This ended up being a little trickier than I thought. I had to write code to make sure that when the second level loaded, the original player and inventory from level 1 was loaded and not a new blank player. I also had to make a script to define the spawn point for level 2. Without setting a spawn point, Unity was loading the player at the exact same coordinates that he was standing at in level 1 when he touched the load scene trigger. This was definitely not what I wanted. This is where I learned about the Game Manager script in Unity. Simply put, it's a script that you can store things in that will follow the player around from level to level, or scene to scene as Unity calls it. I moved some of the variables from the player script to the Game Manager so his stats and inventory would carry over when a new level is loaded. Once that was done, I was pretty much finished with the basic core game loop. I still have a lot of things I want to add, but this gives me a great foundation to start building my game. In future videos, I will be working on the art side of things in Photoshop, level design, animations, sound effects, music, and title and pause menus. Once all that is done, I will be looking for playtesters for the prototype, so if you'd be interested in helping me out with that, just subscribe to this channel and click on the bell so you can be notified when I post new videos. That wraps it up for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.